Welcome everyone to the January 12th Kubernetes SIG Node meeting. Just a reminder, the meetings are recorded and we'll upload them to YouTube for those who can't be here at this time or forget all the great things we say, but we'll treat everyone well in the meetings together. So a number of topics on today's agenda. The first topic was an item that I put on there with Alana that we want to give some general awareness to around maybe some unintended consequences that we saw with how graceful termination worked in liveness probes. Alana, do you want to talk through the issue and maybe give some awareness of the KEP you were proposing?
Yeah, so I threw up sort of a straw KEP for discussion. I didn't want to fill out this whole full-fledged KEP if people are not interested in this approach. But basically, the sort of summary of the issue is that when we use a liveness probe on a pod and the liveness probe fails, it will use the termination grace period seconds for the pod to wait to terminate that thing. And so if the termination grace period seconds is set super long, say like an hour, because you want the pod to be able to gracefully drain connections and that kind of thing, then if your liveness probe fails, it will potentially take up to an hour for the liveness probe to restart the pod, which is not intended behavior, not desired, and could potentially result in some outages. So there's like a number of different approaches we could take to fix this. But probably the most backwards compatible one would be to say, well, we want to be able to configure this directly without changing the existing behavior, because it appears that a number of people have documented sort of like relying on the fact that they expect it will take, the termination period grace seconds to terminate a pod or a container in a pod on a liveness probe failure. So that is what I put in the Kubernetes enhancement repo, sort of up as like a straw proposal. I think I put the link in the notes already. Sorry, Firefox restarted, so all of my tabs have not loaded. Yes, so I put I linked the PR in the agenda. And I don't know if anybody has any specific comments outside of what's already been put on the KEP PR, but do people think that this is a reasonable approach? There are some other possibilities that we could go for that would not require a KEP and an API change. The API change that I'm proposing is backwards compatible. I know there were some concerns about, well, if we add this like field to the liveness probe, it's going to be on all of the probes. So like, are all of the probes going to use it, or like, is it just going to be for the one? And like some concerns about maybe having a field for all probes, but only being used by one. So happy to hear your feedback, comments. Doesn't have to be now. You can also comment on the PR.
Yeah, thanks for the summary and the follow-up on this, Alana. I know personally we at Red Hat were just hit by this issue. And so we are somewhat bit by the scars of teams feeling an unintended consequence of this type of issue. So I saw, Dawn, you had commented that you had seen similar and that it might have had some issues in API review. Did you have any particular references to it? Because I hadn't recalled any.
I tried to find, before this meeting, I couldn't find, because it is, I think that this is why people started to work around that issue. And this is particular things actually hurt GKE a while back. And also I saw this, people came to the signal discussing, so we did suggest support decoupling, but without all the detail, because I obviously from the Clayton, I see the people, the link, he shared, I said the people abusive to using that. Obviously, what we say also, it is abusive using. So, but we didn't show the, so there's the proposal. Not goes to the enhancement that time. I think there's the PR directly. If I remember correctly, the PR directly tried to fix this problem, and it's basically just rejected by the complexity. So I think this is good things like all the process, and more people realize how hard it is, how painful. So that's in the GK, you have to introduce something to detect this kind of problem, and then do something special to deal with because it's been rejected. So there's the one thing.
Sure, I understand that correctly. You're saying you guys might have operational experience of writing something that can detect pods that are in this state and proactively terminate them?
No, we actually don't. And if the pod in the such like the for like the liveness problem failure, and they configure this is one, there's no any good way. So that's we have to proactively tell the customer don't do that. But if it is wedge of the node shut down because we need to drain, so we basically set maximum value and it just shut down. Like 5 minutes, it is kind of reasonable. I even remember in the signal that some people mentioned this one because we do have like the rejection in the API review in the past. So I basically suggest him just, okay, for shutdown, set maximum 5 minutes or maybe 10 minutes. And we have this kind of conversation a couple times.
Yeah, so I get that can happen on node maintenance, where you might have encountered this, but these issues at least struck us when node maintenance was happening, right? It was like you have a 1 hour graceful termination period to allow requests to drain, or even if it was 5 minutes, right? Like you basically double your outage time. So I guess my bias would be I'd love for us to find a way to solve this broadly in the community. And so like,
Totally.
like Kep, Alana, yeah, let's, I'd like we keep pushing this. And I guess if folks have other add-ons or operational experience they might have done to work around it, let's get them on the Kep. But hopefully we can overcome any API review challenges in just the Kep discussion. But
I see Jack Francis linked a comment in the chat where I guess this issue was reported as well in December. The issue that I'm working on was like a super old one that ended up getting reopened. So Jack, do you have any thoughts you want to add?
Hey, Elena and folks. I'm really happy people are talking about this. So basically my involvement, just to give a little bit of a backstory, was observing the change that went in, I think late December for 120 to fix a long-standing edge case where the liveness probe for, I can't remember if it was for execs or for HTTP, but one of the two was never working. And so that was actually fixed and then absorbed the current 1 second default, which had the practical side effect of suddenly introducing a 1 second default to all the liveness probes out there because it hasn't been working. No one had been declaring that timeout value. I mean, folks who are doing it permissively. I'm sure there are folks who were trying to do it and didn't know that it didn't work. But anyway, so I had observed this and I tried to, basically my point was, let's not push this change, let's roll this back because this is going to surprise people. And so I've been thinking about ways to fix this. I mean, it's super unfortunate that there's this behavior that everyone assumed was working for several years and was discovered not to be working, which has these side effects. So I'm wondering if we can just increase that issue. The conclusions of that issue right now are to perhaps marshal a discussion around just increasing the timeout to something like 30 seconds. Because it sounds like what you guys have observed is that folks noticed this new timeout, said, wait a minute, I don't want a timeout, so I'm going to just throw some totally crazy high value, which has
there's a couple of things I think possibly getting a little bit conflated here. So I think looking through sort of the tree of things your link there points to the issue. So that was exec probes. So I think in that case, exec probe timeouts had just like never worked. So you could set them and they just wouldn't be enforced in any way. And so I guess I'm not sure how exactly that was implemented, but I think I don't know if that's like a default or configurable or whatever. In this case, this is like the non-exec probe, sort of like liveness probes, like HTTP, that kind of thing, where if these fail, they don't have anything configurable at all. They default to use the termination grace period seconds that's set at a pod level, and that could be super high. for, you know, like normal operations. So that's
For sure.
they're coupled right now, and there's no way to change them. So that's kind of the thing that I'm trying to tackle here.
Basically, if we determine that you're not live, we shouldn't. The way graceful termination period was originally defined was basically saying how we shut down something that was healthy with enough time. And we haven't really approached how to give the right amount of time to shut down something that was already known to be unhealthy. And so, yeah, I think that's a good summary, Alana. I guess maybe as a concrete action item, if folks could review Alana's KEP, and maybe we could see if we can reach some type of consensus in this release window on a plan. I think that would be good, but
I'll definitely happily support Alana's effort for sure. Thank you so much.
I was wanting to chime in and say, like, what this kind of goes back to, what does a liveness probe failure mean, right? Because if it means the application is not running, then we want to kill it as soon as possible, right? Like 0 grace period termination seconds, right? We want to kill it and start something that will work. So it kind of goes back to, what does a liveness probe failure mean? If it means that the application is not serving requests or not operating properly, then we should kill it immediately. And there shouldn't be any timeout. The timeout should always be 0. So I'm not saying that's a good idea, but I wanted to throw it out there because that could solve this problem by just being opinionated about what the timeout is, by properly defining what a liveness probe failure means.
Yeah, I think that that's not currently defined as like one of the alternatives in this in the KEP, so I could add that. And specifically, I think maybe the way that we would do that is like we'd need a feature flag for that behavior for sure. But like if we have the feature flag turned on, be like kill the thing right away, no wait. Ignore the thing, but in the other case, like maintain the default behavior. I guess my question would be, if we feature flag that, like long term, do we want to phase that in as the default, or like do we want to keep the 2 options? Like that would be my worry.
I to simplify the problem, I kind of really agree with the Seth, but I just want to point out, Seth, I really agree with you. I want to emphasize this. But I noticed that people abuse it this way. The liveness probe, a lot of time people using is not really just liveness, and we saw that way, right? So we add some other probe because there's some people using that liveness is readiness, and yeah, some using for some other purpose. So I guess like simply a trait that the sig kill maybe is not backward compatible. But I totally agree with you from the design point. If we design this correctly initially, and then we shouldn't have this problem, or we fix this earlier. Because I remember when this is problem report a long time back, and before we have so many structure and the sig architecture, and so then we shouldn't allow such long time, like the period time, grace period time for liveness problem.
So I think, yeah, we get the option added, and maybe we can think of creative ways to make the good choice, the safe choice that people opt into. Personally, if I could have opted in on the pod spec to say liveness means, true death, then that would have been great for our use case. I'm sure anyone else who's running ingress had similar scenarios. So thanks, Alana, for helping push this forward, and we'll try to continue discussion on the KEP. So in the interest of time, maybe on the next item, a few of us have been discussing on the Red Hat side what we were interested in pursuing in 121, and we want to open a discussion to the broader community, folks, if what we wanted to do as a group in 121 and try to start shepherding planning. So Mrinal, you had a doc you wanted to maybe share through?
Sure. Okay, so I don't have screen sharing enabled, Derek.
Let me give you those permissions. I forgot that we changed this last year. You should have it now, Mrinal.
Okay. Right. Can you see my screen?
Yes.
Okay, awesome. So basically what we did is we put together a bunch of items that are continuing from last time, and also things that are like low hanging fruit but got stalled in 120 for some reason, that we can just continue to push forward, and some new items that we identified we could benefit from. And this is the table. So we can go from a top down, and like I'm sure like others on the call may have ideas for what else should be pulled in. So maybe quickly go through this and then have other proposals like the one Don just added to the doc. Does that work?
Yeah, it'd be great.
Okay. So the first item on the list is CRI graduation. So while doing this work, we realized that we first have to update the runtimes like containerd and cryo to support both v1 and v1 alpha 1. So we can bring it back into the CI and then drop v1 alpha 1. So we have the kept merged. Cryo is updated. Mike, do you know what's the status on containerd side?
Yeah, we're updated as well. Yep.
Okay, awesome. Then I think we are ready for the next step to bring the runtimes back into CI and then drop v1 alpha 1. So that can proceed, no blockers over there. Any questions or comments on that item? Okay. So the next one is run as group, and I think here Mayank opened a PR and then it just didn't go further. So maybe we can just continue moving that work forward, because it looks like it shouldn't be a lot of work beyond addressing the comments in the PR, I think. Okay. So the next one on the list is node graceful shutdown. So David's PR for that feature got merged in 120. And the next step there is to test it out, gather feedback, and also have a plan for some kind of an end-to-end test in the CI, so we can move it to beta.
Yep, I think that makes sense. Yeah.
Okay, all right. So so we spoke yesterday. What we thought is like if we can, I don't know if we can do a complete restart in the E2E test, but at least we can do half of it. So we can fake the signal that the kubelet gets to do the drain, and then have a special pod that waits till the end of its graceful period to write out a file and then make sure that file gets written. So that gets us halfway to verify it, and then we can figure out what we want to do about an actual restart with system.
Yep, I think that makes sense. Definitely having end-to-end tests of the shutdown is important, and then moving into beta and so forth.
Okay. All right. Awesome. Any more thoughts on that one? Okay. So the next one on the list is C groups v2. So we got a lot of work merged into 119, but we didn't really make a lot of progress during 120. So what I think we should be doing there next is testing out what we already merged, making sure that it works well. And then the second thing really is like taking advantage of the new C groups v2 features. Like there are new knobs in C groups v2, like memory low, memory high, that don't map to C groups v1. So we play with that in the runtimes, for example, using annotations or something, and then figure out how we can expose those features or how they map to the pod settings that are there today in Kubernetes to take this forward. And then the second thing that we can do is see how we can configure the QoS lysis to take advantage of these new features. And like the third step would be how to use a userland killer like oomd or something. But I think before that we need to do these first these two steps. So it's mostly some testing and then proposing additions.
Just curious for this one, does it make sense? Do we already have ETE tests in Kubernetes CI for
So,
Secret V2?
so Harshal is working on enabling that. He got Cryo with cgroups V1 working on a periodic right now, and his next task is to get some cgroups V2 running there.
Yeah, just in general, just to remind everyone, the plan was to keep kubelets supporting V1 or V2 for some period of time. So we won't be able to, obviously there's no intention to move everyone to V2 necessarily. So we're going to need to grow a new CI job specific for this.
Yeah.
But just for those who weren't aware of that previously.
Yeah, so like I see a lot of complaints from customers around like kill really not behaving well, and the end game really is to get us to a position where we can use custom user and daemons and also better behavior from the kernel with the fixes going into V2. So if we keep making progress, hopefully we'll reach there one day.
Yeah, I think there was also some discussion around eviction and using something like the PSI metrics.
Right.
And stuff.
Correct. Yep. Absolutely. Yeah. So I think like OOMD uses PSI, David. Yeah.
So Manu, I want to ask you, when we talk about the SIG version 2, we are not talking about all the resource management, right? Like the new enhancement for memory, new enhancement on CPU, and the new enhancement on the disk, all those kind of things. We are not. We just only want to have enable of the node can support both V1 and V2. And then based on that one, we want to evolve and to utilize some V2 functionality. So that's the separate feature request, right?
Right. Yeah. So I think the first one is, yes, testing the current conversion. And the second point over there is like the new V2 features like the memory low, high. It will be testing it out at the runtime level and then proposing new additions. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
I think
because
I'm sorry, Don. I think on the KEP, we said the existing KEP covered parity with V1 capability. So anytime we bring in a new V2 capability, like I treat that as a separate activity.
Yes. So I just want to make it clear because people start talking about V2, many fancy features, but actually that need carefully design.
Yep.
And the whole memory management, even like the QoS might be have to thinking about as a whole.
Right. Yep.
To design. Yeah. This is just only for the capability, so we can start support the V2.
Yep. Right. So the next one on the list is user namespaces, and is Mauricio Rodrigo on the call? Okay. So I mean, they have there's a KEP open. There's been a fair bit of back and forth review going on. Like Tim Hawken and others have also chimed in over there. So if we get some agreement, then we can probably start working on phase 1. Is if we like reach agreement before the announcement, please. That's what we are thinking. Because the runtimes have the features that we need for implementing.
Yeah.
Just for my memory, Mrinal, and I can follow through, but did phase 1 include volume support, or was it just?
Phase 1 is all using a single user namespace. So yeah, the volumes will with that.
So are you say the phase 1 basically is just only cluster mode, right? If I remember correctly, they have the 3 mode. This is just cluster mode. Okay.
Right. Yeah.
So do the mapping. Okay, got it.
Yeah.
Thanks.
Yeah. And there's some things are moving in the kernel. We don't know yet whether they're going to land or not. But hopefully by the time we do phase 1, then we get some signal from the kernel that we are ready and the later phases become easier for us.
So the way we do sure the phase one don't have the dependency on the kernel, right?
Yeah, like if we use
Okay.
a single mapping, yeah, we are fine. We
Yes.
don't have a dependency.
Yes. And if I remember correctly, I need to refresh my memory on this one too. So even like phase one, there are some small change required on the CLI API.
Yes, yes. The CI, so I think it proposes those changes.
So I just want to make sure we are not like the promote the CLI at beta, but then later we found, oh, there's a, so I just want to make sure there's this, maybe have some coordination and maybe some of the CLI related change we want before the CLI beta, it can get in to this one.
Yeah, I think that makes sense. So if by announcement freeze, we can reach agreement on this KEP, that will be good before we declare CRI as beta. Yeah. Okay, maybe we can capture that. Okay. So the next one is the one covered by Ilana, the liveness probe timeout. Then Don, you proposed the ephemeral containers. So I put down leave verb as the owner for moving to beta. And
Yes,
can you be the approver, Don? So
definitely. Yeah.
okay, okay, awesome. Okay, so the next one on the list is swap. I mean, it's early days, so Karan and Ilana talked about it, I think, last week. So best we can do is maybe target a KEP.
Yeah, I'm not even looking to target a KEP for this release, probably the next release. I think there's just a lot of discussion and research that needs to be done on this one, so.
Yeah, that's fair. I mean, we can continue gathering requirements and see.
Yeah, I think that's the plan. Like, not actually have the KEP like approved alpha or implementable for 121, but hopefully maybe for 122.
Yeah, we can just work towards a KEP with no commitment.
Are we going to target this one for the SIG version 2 only, or both version 1 and the version 2 have to support? I think we because I remember there's some enhancement, but I didn't personal try with the version 2 on those kind of support. But I want to know more. And do we want to just support one version, SIG group version 2, or maybe both? I think this also need because I believe the implementation and the design should be different. If I remember last time I checked SIG version 2.
Yeah, Don, I think that we'll have to dig into the details of what's changed. But we feel, at least from the conversation we had yesterday, we feel we should target both because customers may benefit from having swap before we get ready with C groups V2, which could take like a year or more from now.
Got it. Thanks.
So the next one on the list is like enabling seccomp by default. And we spoke about this just before the break, and Sasha and I are working together on a KEP. We will get one ready before next week's meeting. So we have something to discuss, and then we can see. I mean, if we reach agreement, we feel it may not be too much of a stretch to actually target an alpha for this. If we reach agreement, that's a big thing. So next one I'm gonna hold because we have a separate topic on the agenda for this item after this one. Then I think there's like a couple more items. So there's a syscuttles move graduating it. We don't have an owner for that yet. So if anyone on the call that isn't already signed up for something has the time and want to be an owner, just let us know and we can look into moving that forward.
Yeah, so on this one, Mrinal, it wasn't until there was some discussion on the Slack channel either end of last year or early this year around syscuttles, where I would have thought, given the state of syscuttles now, I would have been fine just moving it right to GA, but there was some feedback around the user experience when using unsafe syscuttles that
Okay.
I may want to refresh my memory on, but I didn't know if the person who gave that feedback might be on the call or not. But it was more saying maybe the node should be able to be tainted appropriately if it had unsafe sys controls consumed on it or not. But we can go back and look.
Okay. All right.
Even that, I think, could be handled maybe post GA of the existing sys controls support.
Okay. All right. Derek, I captured that in the notes. We can follow. Okay. Yeah. So the next one is CRI container log rotation and graduating that. And Urvashi is happy to work on that. I think this was captured in Derek's feature list and we just didn't get to 120. So any thoughts, comments on that one?
This one, my most concern is just compatibility with the production, because I remember this one's been done in the first we define the CRI and being delayed because have the compatibility issue with OpenShift. So now if we want to enable this by default, I want to make sure other production also is compatible. So now the reason is because that time there's any compatibility issue on the GKE, but because I have the compatibility issue with OpenShift, so we delayed, engineer delayed. But I know over time production move forward, not just GKE and not just OpenShift and not many products. So I guess this one we have to do some like the due diligence to figure out there's no compatibility.
Okay.
At least I find someone from GKE, make sure this one still is valid.
Yeah, maybe Urvashi could, I don't even know if we had probably predates KEP, so even just getting a document written up on that outcome, maybe Urvashi could do as a first step.
Yeah, one of the things I have on the agenda for later is a KEP triage thing from last meeting where I went and did a spreadsheet of all the KEPs. And one thing that I've noticed is people reaching out to me being like, where's my KEP? And it's because there was no issue tracking it. So anybody who has something in that situation, something that they want done but does not have an issue in the K enhancements repo, I'm hoping to get that addressed in this release.
Thanks, Elila.
Okay. So the next one on the list is a memory manager, and I think it's waiting review from Clayton.
Yeah, it's waiting for the final review from Clayton. Kevin already finished with the review, so it's the only thing that stopped us.
Do you mind linking to it in the doc if you have a link handy? So
yeah, sure. I will provide a link to the pull request.
Okay, thanks. Awesome. And the last one on the list is pod resources concrete assignment. Derek, I don't remember enough detail here if you want to talk to it.
Yeah, so this was, the KEP was already approved in 120, but the pod resources endpoint that lets you do things like GPU, understand what devices got assigned to what pods. The KEP had extended that to understand what CPU sets, if I recall, got assigned to particular pods. And I think where it landed in the last releases, we had the KEP, but then other engineering distractions prevented us from getting the implementation done. So some of the goal here, I think, was trying to support a longer term goal of having topology aware scheduling information fed back to the cluster scheduler. And this was like one of the early prereqs. So yeah, Renaud had reviewed the cap, and we'll look at the implementation.
Okay, right. So that's really the last one in the list here. Do folks have other items that we can mention here?
What's the current status about the pod overhead? I don't think about we finished that work. We've been working on that one. And container, the runtime class, I think we made progress last release, but there's some small progress. But the pod overhead, we didn't make much.
Okay.
The reason I brought this up, because that auto-sizing system reserved, without really handle pod overhead properly and charge properly, I don't think you still have like the issues, overloaded, still potential. And so we may have to want to.
Sure. I think like maybe Sergey or Eric Ernst may have the latest on it, but I think it makes sense because we were talking about GA8 along with runtime classes based on comments here.
The other maybe what we could do is we're also big thank you for helping get this list together and sharing it. Maybe as a SIG, we could set a goal of giving everyone a week to reflect and then come back next week and see if there were tweaks or adjustments or gaps that we missed. But then if we can get some agreement on what we wanted to focus on as a group tentatively next Tuesday, that would allow us to better focus where KEPs we need to give attention to before the freeze date, which was the 9th. So
yeah, makes sense. So Derek, maybe next week we come back and do like a commit check for each of these and see what actually we want to focus on.
And where we don't have clear like authors versus approvers type stuff, maybe we can help flesh that out in the week ahead. But big thank you for helping put this through. And the rights to edit this, it should be just anybody in the SIG Node group, right? So
I think so, yeah.
Yeah, okay. All right, if it's okay, we can move on to the next topic, which I think was Ryan and Herschel.
Yeah, I'm filling for Herschel. So at Red Hat, we are seeing quite a few nodes going into not ready, and on every single node type that we have to calculate the system reserve to try and protect the node from going into those memory constraint scenarios where the kubelet's not running, SSH isn't running, systemd performance not working correctly. And so the way that the kubelet does this currently is that you set a system reserved on it so that the C group gets set throughout the system. And currently you have to do that prior to the kubelet starting. And so the proposal here is to adopt basically Google's plan, which is that they have an algorithm to calculate a system memory and CPU reserved. And we would like to put this in the kubelet itself. And the way that we're proposing to do this currently is that on an alpha release, we would have basically a default profile that contains the algorithm that Google uses. It uses a sliding scale, like number of like 4 gigabytes of memory gets you 25% system reserve setup. And then perhaps on a beta or GA release, allow different profiles to be injected into the system, depending on if there's more demand for this feature. But I think for Red Hat's purposes, the scale that Google's using is probably sufficient. And so that's basically the feature that we're proposing here. We can do it outside the kubelet, but that means basically pushing out scripts to all the nodes to be able to calculate this in a uniform way. And we feel that the kubelet is probably the right spot for this. we had been discussing whether it's dynamic, meaning if there's more memory or CPU added to the system, does the kubelet actually see that? And I think that's to be determined. It might be difficult to have it automatically see that, so you might need to restart, but that's basically the only gotcha that we have seen so far.
Ryan, maybe can comment since the Kubernetes, the GKE thing is proposed by me. Yeah. And also I proposed the auto resizing long time ago when we first started node allocatable. So even GKE today is not dynamic. I did propose some dynamic way when I first proposed node allocatable because we are based on the number of the pod. So because there's the pod itself, the overhead, that's the separate cap we've been talk about. Back then, I do want to charge to the pod, but they also have like the management overhead, like the number of the container, number of the pod, how much of the Docker will be using based on those kind of things, and how much pod. So you can see like the CRI, when we design, even like logging, we originally think about we'll be charging to the pod or container instead to the node, but we didn't because that's too big change. If you notice, trace back in the old of the CRI, I did propose, I talked to engineer behind, and Google the proposal actually is charging to the node. Even like the some disk IO usage, we try to charge it to the container, charging to pod, but that's too dramatic change. And then at the end, we end up have like the, so basically, so that's why we have the proposal, you can see like a maximum pod per node. And what we are today apply, it is per node based on the machine size. It's not optimized. It's not. So basically we base it on our production, based on the kernel version. Also, there's the factor about the kernel. Different kernel version, actually the usage also is different, which is unfortunate because kernel thread using is different. So I just want to correct here, we are not really auto size based on the demand. Okay. My original, it is basically before I assign, I will know this pod, this container will go into that node. So how much reserve, that will be dynamic. Then very easily that because the scheduler, because we will pass that node allocatable to the scheduler. You can see all those design. And so then scheduler will be do less late because we dynamically change node allocable resource, all those kind of things. Then we will say, can I accept this job? We'll be do the best. We didn't do that. At the end, actually today is based on the machine type. We monitor from our kernel version and monitor from all those kind of things. And also you have the different production, have the different daemon upfront the schedule. So that's why we didn't really dynamic. I just wanted to let you know how complicated it is. And in the original design, what I proposed, even like include of the CRI and also node allocable and many things, I did think about auto sizing. And it's just hard in the community. Even if the GKE cannot, it's much harder to do, but it's maybe can do. But for some of people using Kubernetes for their internal infrastructure, maybe it's way easier. But things like the GKE and OpenShift provide services for cloud user, makes it much harder. I just honestly share with you. Because if like the Borg, I did propose this for Borg many times. But then the cost is too big. Many years ago, cost is too big for every time when you made the kernel change. So that's why even for Borg, I back off. I just let you know here.
Maybe it would be more beneficial perhaps to work on the pod overhead maybe instead of this. What's your thought on that?
I do think about pod overhead. So the reason pod overhead also been proposed a long time back, and we delay that work. It is because that time we only have the one container runtime, right? So then we only have the run C. So the reason pod overhead is later have like the more urgency, relative urgency is just because the clear container booming. Of course, that's not clear container, that's the kata. And then there's the gvisor cases, and there's the many other like the some like other container. So that's why we are started to looking at the container runtime and plus the pod overhead. I just want to say pod overhead for me also, I think about we could enhance in the long run. We could enhance a long run because we could change our elite container. In a long time when we work on the Rocket, actually I did talk to CoreOS folks, and we could build our, make our elite container more intelligent. We never get to do those things because it's all those advanced feature might not common use cases for everyone. So that's why we didn't move forward. But we do think about in the long run, init container can do a lot of other jobs.
Yeah, so Don, thank you for sharing the background, at least on Google's experience. When we had researched some of this, I think we've looked at what every vendor is trying to do in their hosted space. And I think everyone has different tables to some degree. I think the way I'm trying to think about this though, and just to maybe softly push back on some of your comments is, we have heuristics today in the kubelet that like pods per core, right? That is a good example of like, it's a very rough heuristic, but it's probably used everywhere right now on a rough, like, yeah, you can put what, 10 pods per core or something is our default. And I think what I see is a lot of struggle on even setting it at all, setting system reserved at all, or setting basically any reservation that like, I felt like having some heuristic from the SIG that gave was potentially valuable. Whether or not this particular mapping table is the right table to go as a kind of a different topic, I guess. But I guess what I wonder is like, do you feel like it's not even worth providing something given all the variables, or do you still think you could see a community benefit in having some heuristic the way we have, say, with pods per core?
The reason it is how you're going to measure that overhead. You're based on the what we introduce maximum pod per load to measure, or you basically just say, oh, I estimate average of the pod on each node. How much? How you're going to estimate that? And how you're going to say, oh, 30 pods, maybe it is my average. And for each pod, they have like the 2 or 3 container running, include of those default container, info container, then you measure that one. And also then you end up, especially for OpenShift use cases, you end up maybe have some like some database lack of those things running. Maybe they want a single one. They basically told you, say, you are reserved too much for Kubernetes, which is only management one stateful set here. And then are you going to allow that override? So this is kind of really, so this is why I think a long time back, I said easy, we auto sizing, but auto sizing, dynamic sizing, not auto sizing, sorry. Dynamic sizing based on the assignment, based on the scheduling. But obviously, I know I cannot win over from the scheduler because that's more change for them, because we really want a simple scheduler, right? Like the Kubernetes is not what I want, more complex, enhanced, intelligent scheduler. But the auto sizing is really hard because you only on the node to do the local optimization, which is not a cluster level things.
Maybe what I was trying to wonder is like right now you can set system reserved where you can set a literal value, X megabytes of RAM, right? Or I think we also support syntax that lets you support a percentage based value. And the thing that, so you can say I reserve 10% of RAM or something, right? And the thing that strikes me when I look at the table here and I look at what others have done is rather than just having a fixed percentage or a literal value, it's kind of like if I could provide a function instead, right? And really what this table is showing is just a plot And like, if we could provide a syntax that allow somebody to provide that plot, like, I think it makes things a lot easier for how you manage nodes across a wide variety of footprints, right?
I agree with you. This is I do have I think the similar proposal captured in one of the really old of the issue, like what's the formula we can using. We can carry out this discussion. I just want to say that if we really want to make this work, you have to, if this is just like the guidance for community, maybe that's.
Yeah. So to Ryan's point on maybe pod head versus this, like, I think that's a false choice versus, like, if we change this, instead of saying auto system reserve sizing, we said formula-based reservations, and still left it easier to supply the formula, I think we can get the same results, and people can then figure out the right formulas in their production environment. But like, it's unquestionable to me that, like, this is a plot of a graph, and people figure it out for their sizes how to best line that. So I don't know, maybe we can take that feedback and adjust. The other feedback, I don't know, Dawn, if you had experience on it you wanted to share, was if we wanted to do reservations for other resources aside from memory. So I think Mrinal and I discussed PIDs and I forget the other one, Mrinal.
Ephemeral, maybe.
Ephemeral disk. Yeah, thank you. But just looking at this, at least Ryan, I feel like having a function would be going a long way.
Okay.
Yeah.
I'll take that feedback. Thanks.
Okay.
Just a quick time check. We have a ton of agenda left. I'm wondering if we want to triage the rest of the items on here.
Yeah, good point, Alana.
Sergey has an item about a bug, which I think we should probably talk about, even though he's not here.
Yeah, Sergey has some appointment, so couldn't make it today.
Yeah, he asked me to cover for him because I think his kid is sick. I can cover that now if we want to cover that next.
Yeah, if there's a 120 regression,
it's a regression from 120. So the issue is linked there. And I think both Sergey and I have spent some time looking into this. Basically, there was a change in 120, which was actually a something that had previously been reverted because of performance issues. But we are finding that introducing this again, we're still having a lot of performance issues on pod deletion. And this is causing quite a lot of test flaking, as well as like just generally pods are taking a lot longer to delete. And there's concerns that that might cause production implications like above and beyond the like tests flaking. So I know that we've had, I think Paco Shu like suggested a possible patch to fix this, but I looked at it and I wasn't like, it adds a lot more complexity to the kubelet logic, and I'm not convinced it will actually fix it. And so Sergey is suggesting we just revert it, and I think I also agree with that, but I wanted to get other folks' feedback on this. It's a really like sort of sticky thing that has to do with the sandbox cleanup.
Yeah, so the concern was if we were leaking sandboxes previously and we just didn't know. So I don't know if anyone has a memory on this, but there was a lot of discussion. It's always a recurring topic on if we've discovered we're leaking something or we weren't. Seth, did you ever look at the original ones of these in the past?
If we were leaking sandboxes or not?
Well, I'm thinking back to, I don't know if David's here, but we had issues where we were wanting to make sure, is the pod actually gone before we deleted the thing? And I know at least, I could be conflating issues, Alana, I'm sorry, but last year, both Seth and I spent a fair bit of time helping various engineers explore if things were deleted or not deleted. And my memory at the time here was that there was some concern that sandboxes weren't always being short delete or not, but my memory could be poor. So I'll have to track this down myself, but I didn't know, Seth, if you had a memory.
I do not have a memory of it. The things I remember working on were mostly mirror pod related, and like mirror pods being deleted before the static pod actually shut down and stuff like that.
Yeah, so that was the thing I didn't know if at the same time we were asking, like, is the thing actually deleted or not across mirror pods and normal pods, if this sandbox issue had come up similar in that discussion, but we'll have to chase it down.
I don't know the original problem. I don't think about we discussed at the SIG Node. I didn't look at that. But I'm totally okay with revolt to avoid the potential of the production regression. But then we can have more time to figure out how to properly fix the original issue.
Because the root issue was about CNIs, right? Like, it's saying that we were deleting them from the API server before we knew the CNI had cleaned up.
Yes, I think that's right.
And I'm not sure which CNI was being used here with that report.
Can we come back this one? Can we agree revolt now and then come back with more detail next week to figure out what's the original issue, how we are going to properly fix in the new release?
Yeah, I think so.
So you're comfortable with reverting for now? That was what Sergey suggested.
Yes, please.
Okay.
Because
yeah, I'll sync with him, and then either he or I or someone else can submit the PR for that.
Thanks.
Okay, so we have 1 minute left, and apologies for the full agenda. If it's okay, the items we didn't get to, we'll move to our next agenda. And if some of them were items that we wanted to explore, looks like checkpoint restore, we should probably get them on the 121 plan doc. But big thank you to everyone helping make the meeting so productive today. So I will talk to you all later, and let's try to get the planned items settled up for next week. Bye, everyone.
Thank you. Alala and Majnun, thank you both.
Thanks.
Bye, folks. Thanks.